Who invited you to this wedding? You're not welcome in this family, said my son's bride during the wedding I had paid for. I simply replied, I'm leaving, but first take a look at that photo I posted at the reception. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. I never imagined that the happiest day of my son's life would become the most humiliating day of mine. Standing at the entrance of St. Michael's Cathedral, I smoothed down my navy blue dress one last time. The same dress I'd worn to my husband's funeral 15 years ago, but it was the nicest thing I owned. I'd spent every penny I had on this wedding. $45,000. My entire retirement savings, gone, but it was for Marcus. My only child, my everything. The morning had started perfectly. I'd arrived early to help with last-minute arrangements, my hands trembling with excitement as I arranged the white roses I'd personally selected. This was supposed to be our moment, mother and son, finally sharing something beautiful together. Mrs. Patterson? The wedding planner approached me with a tight smile. Lily would like to speak with you before the ceremony begins. I followed her to the bridal suite, my heart swelling with anticipation. Maybe Lily wanted to thank me for everything I'd done. Maybe she'd finally acknowledge that without my financial sacrifice, none of this would be possible. The door opened to reveal Lily in her pristine white gown, surrounded by her bridesmaids. She looked radiant, perfect. Everything a bride should be. But when her eyes met mine, something cold flashed across her face. Teresa, she said, not bothering to smile. We need to talk. The bridesmaids exchanged glances, and I felt my stomach tighten. Something was wrong. Of course, dear. You look absolutely beautiful, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Lily adjusted her veil with deliberate precision. I need you to understand something. Today is about Marcus and me. Our families. Our friends. Our future together. I nodded, confused. Yes, of course it is. I'm so happy for you both. Good. Her voice was sharp now, cutting. Then you'll understand why I need to be direct with you. The room went silent. Even the bridesmaids stopped their chatter. You weren't supposed to be here today, Lily continued, her words hitting me like physical blows. This is a family celebration, and frankly, you don't fit in with our crowd. My mouth went dry. I don't understand. I'm Marcus's mother. I paid for this entire wedding. One of the bridesmaids, I think her name was Jessica, let out a small laugh. That's exactly the problem, isn't it? You keep throwing money around. Like it makes you important. Lily nodded approvingly. Marcus and I discussed this. We think it would be best if you just made an appearance at the ceremony and then left quietly. Before the reception. The words seemed to echo in the small room. I gripped the doorframe, feeling dizzy. But I planned this. I chose the flowers, the menu, the venue. I even picked out your wedding favors. My voice came out as a whisper. And we're grateful, Lily said, but her tone suggested otherwise. But gratitude doesn't mean you belong here with our real family and friends. Real family. The phrase cut deeper than anything else she could have said. I looked around the room, searching for some sign of compassion, some indication that this was all a misunderstanding. But the bridesmaids were looking at their phones, bored by the conversation. This was nothing to them. Just an awkward moment before the real celebration could begin. Does Marcus know about this? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Lily's smile was poisonous. Whose idea do you think it was? My legs nearly gave out. My son. My boy, whom I'd raised alone, sacrificed everything for, loved unconditionally. He wanted me gone from his wedding day. I see, I managed to say. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. Lily turned back to the mirror, dismissing me like hired help. The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. Please try to be inconspicuous. I walked out of that room in a daze. The hallway seemed to stretch forever, the walls closing in around me. Guests were filing into the cathedral, laughing and chatting, completely unaware that the mother of the groom had just been told she wasn't welcome at her own son's celebration. I found myself in the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the harsh fluorescent light. My face looked older than my 57 years. Tired. Used up. Like a woman who had given everything and received nothing in return, but then something shifted inside me. A cold, calculated calm settled over my nerves. I pulled out my phone and opened the Photos app, scrolling until I found what I was looking for. The image that would change everything. The one I'd been carrying like a secret weapon for 3 months now. I'd hoped I'd never have to use it. I'd prayed that maybe, somehow, things would work out differently. But Lily had just shown me exactly who she really was, and more importantly, who I was to her. Nothing. I walked back into the cathedral and took my seat in the front row, right where the mother of the groom belonged. Several guests nodded at me politely. Mrs. Henderson from down the street gave me a warm smile. These people had no idea what had just happened. The music began, and Marcus appeared at the altar in his black tuxedo. For a moment, he looked like the little boy I used to tuck into bed every night, the child who used to tell me I was the best mommy in the world. But when his eyes found mine, there was nothing. No warmth, no acknowledgement. Just empty politeness. Lily walked down the aisle like a queen, her train flowing behind her like water. She was beautiful, I had to admit. And she knew it. Every step was calculated, every smile perfectly positioned for the cameras. When she reached Marcus, they joined hands and turned toward the minister. Neither of them looked at me again. The ceremony passed in a blur of traditional words and false promises. Love, honor, cherish, till death do us part. I wondered if Lily meant any of it, or if this was just another performance. As the newlyweds walked back down the aisle, I stood with everyone else and applauded. But I wasn't celebrating their union. I was preparing for what came next, the reception. Hall was decorated exactly as I'd envisioned it 6 months ago when I'd put down the deposit. White linens, gold accents, centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath. Everything perfect, everything elegant, everything paid for with money I'd earned working double shifts at the hospital for 23 years. I slipped away from the crowd and made my way to the guest book table near the entrance. This was where guests signed their names and left their congratulations. But tonight, there would be something extra for them to discover. I carefully placed the 8x10 photograph right next to the guest book, propped up so everyone would see it clearly. Then I took a step back and admired my work. Perfect. The image was crystal clear, taken with my neighbor's telephoto lens 3 months ago. It showed Lily and a man who definitely wasn't Marcus, locked in an intimate embrace outside a downtown hotel. But not just any man, Danny. Marcus's younger brother. I could hear the cocktail hour beginning in the main hall, glasses clinking and laughter echoing off the walls. Soon, guests would start trickling over to sign the book. And when they did, they'd get quite the surprise. I smoothed down my navy dress one final time and walked toward the exit. At the doorway, I turned back to see Lily holding court near the bar, surrounded by admirers, basking in the attention. She had no idea that in about 10 minutes, her perfect wedding day was about to become her worst nightmare. I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped into the cool evening air. Finally free, driving away from that reception hall, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I couldn't stop thinking about Marcus at age 7, crying in my arms because the other kids at school made fun of his worn-out sneakers. Why can't we have nice things like everyone else, Mommy? He'd asked, his small face streaked with tears. I'd held him tight and promised him that someday, we would. Someday, I'd make sure he had everything those other kids had. I just needed to work a little harder, save a little more. That was 50 years ago. I'd kept that promise, hadn't I? The memory hit me like a physical punch as I pulled into my driveway. The same small house where I'd raised Marcus alone after losing David to a heart attack. David had been 34. I was 31 with a 12-year-old boy and a mortgage I had no idea how to pay. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the house. It looked smaller than I remembered. Shabbier. The paint was peeling around the window frames, and the front porch sagged slightly on one side. I'd been meaning to fix these things for years, but there was never any money left over. Every spare dollar went to Marcus' college tuition when he couldn't decide on a major and switched 3 times. The down payment on his first apartment because his credit wasn't good enough. Car repairs when he totaled his Honda and needed transportation to his new job. The security deposit on the bigger apartment when he and Lily moved in together. Always something. Always Marcus. I finally forced myself to go inside. The house felt hollow, like it had been holding its breath all day waiting for me to return. I poured myself a glass of wine, cheap stuff from a box, but it would have to do, and sank into David's old recliner. The photo albums were still spread across the coffee table where I'd left them that morning. I'd planned to bring them to the reception, thinking maybe some of the older relatives would enjoy looking through them during dinner. Pictures of Marcus. Growing up, achieving things, becoming the man I'd always known he could be. What a fool I'd been. I opened the album from his high school years and found the photo I was looking for. Marcus in his cap and gown at graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling at the camera. I was wearing the same navy dress I'd worn today, actually. It was the only dress I owned that was nice enough for special occasions. In the photo, I looked proud. Happy. Like all the sacrifice had been worth it. Marcus had been accepted to 3 different colleges, but the state school offered the best financial aid package. I'd worked extra shifts at the hospital for months to save up for his dorm room essentials. New sheets, a mini fridge, a desk lamp, everything the orientation packet said he'd need. The night before he left for college, he'd hugged me tight. Thanks for everything, Mom. I know it wasn't easy doing this alone. For a moment, just a moment, it felt like all the exhaustion and worry and sleepless nights had led to something meaningful. My boy was going to have opportunities I'd never had. He Was going to make something of himself, and he had, hadn't he? Bachelor's degree in business, decent job at a marketing firm, nice apartment, beautiful girlfriend. From the outside, Marcus had everything I'd dreamed of for him. So why did I feel like such a failure? I flipped through more pages, looking for clues I might have missed. Marcus at his college graduation, I'd driven 8 hours to attend, taking an unpaid day off work. Marcus at his first job promotion, I'd taken him out to dinner at a restaurant I couldn't really afford. Marcus moving in with Lily, I'd helped them shop for furniture and ended up buying most of it myself because they were just starting out. In every photo, I was there. Supporting him, cheering him on, making sure he had what he needed, but when I looked closely at his face in these pictures, really studied his expression, I saw something that made my stomach clench. Obligation. Like, he was going through the motions of being a loving son because it was expected, not because he felt it. When had that started? When had I become a burden instead of a blessing? My phone buzzed with a text message. For a split second, my heart jumped, thinking maybe it was Marcus, maybe he'd realized what happened and wanted to make things right, but it was just my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. How was the wedding? I bet you looked beautiful. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. It was memorable. What else could I say? That my son and his new wife had humiliated me in front of 200 people? That I'd just blown up their marriage before the cake was even cut? That I was sitting alone in my shabby house, drinking box wine and wondering where everything went wrong. Mrs. Chen was a sweet woman, but she wouldn't understand. Her children called her every week, visited for holidays, included her in their lives. She probably couldn't imagine a mother being treated the way I'd been treated today. I thought about calling my sister Janet, but she lived 3 states away and had her own problems. Besides, what would I tell her? That I'd been naive enough to think love and sacrifice would be enough? That I'd spent 57 years learning I was wrong. The house felt too quiet, so I turned on the television. Some romantic comedy was playing, the kind where misunderstandings get resolved and families reunite and everyone learns valuable lessons about what really matters. Fiction. Pure fiction. I must have dozed off in David's chair because the next thing I knew, my phone was ringing. The caller ID made my pulse race. Marcus. I let it ring 4 times before answering, not wanting to sound too eager. Hello? Mom. His voice was tight, strained. We need to talk. Do we? I kept my tone neutral, proud of how calm I sounded. What you did tonight? He paused, and I could hear voices in the background. Angry voices. How could you do that to us? Us. Even now, even after everything, it was us versus me. I didn't do anything, Marcus. I simply left a photograph where people could see it. What they chose to do with that information was up to them. You destroyed our wedding. Lily is, she's devastated. I almost laughed. Devastated that she got caught, maybe. And how do you think I felt when your wife told me I wasn't welcome at my own son's reception? The reception I paid for with my life savings? Silence on the other end of the line. Mom, Lily was just stressed. Wedding planning is hard, and, stop. I cut him off. Just stop making excuses for her. I've heard enough excuses to last a lifetime. She's my wife now. You have to respect that. Wife. The woman who'd been carrying on with his own brother for God knew how long was now his wife, and I had to respect that. Marcus, I said quietly, do you know what your wife was doing with Danny behind your back? Another pause. Longer this time. That photo, it's not what it looks like. Danny explained everything. They were just talking. My heart broke a little more. He was choosing to believe the lie rather than face the truth. Just like I'd chosen to believe that my sacrifices mattered, that my love was valued, that someday things would be different. If that's what you want to believe, then believe it, I said. But don't call me again expecting me to pretend along with you. Mom, please. I hung up. The house was quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. Not empty. Peaceful, almost. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to worry about Marcus. Didn't have to figure out how to help him or save him. Or fix whatever was broken in his life. He'd made his choice. And finally, so had I. 3 months before that wedding, I was supposed to be at my book club meeting. But Mrs. Patterson had called in sick, and since I was the only one with a key to the community center, I'd driven over to unlock the building. For the other ladies. That's when I saw them. I was pulling into the parking lot behind the building when a silver BMW caught my eye. It looked familiar, but I couldn't place where I'd seen it before. As I got closer, I realized why it looked familiar. It was Danny's car. Marcus's younger brother, the one who'd never quite found his footing in life, who borrowed money from everyone and never paid it back, who'd been living in their parents' basement until they died in that car accident 2 years ago. But Danny wasn't alone in that car. Through the windshield, I could see 2 figures pressed together in what was clearly an intimate embrace. My first thought was good for Danny, maybe he'd finally found someone. He'd been alone for so long, drifting from job to job, relationship to relationship. Then the woman pulled back, and I saw her face clearly. Lily.my hand flew to my mouth to stifle the gasp. This couldn't be happening. There had to be some explanation. Some innocent reason why my son's fiancée was wrapped around his brother like that, but even as I tried to rationalize what I was seeing, they were kissing again. Deep, passionate kisses that left no room for innocent explanations. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely operate the camera. I knew I should drive away, pretend I'd never seen this, but something made me stay. Some instinct told me I needed proof, because no one would believe this without it. I managed to take several photos through my windshield before they broke apart. Lily smoothed down her hair and checked her makeup in the rearview mirror while Danny lit a cigarette. They looked comfortable together, familiar. Like this wasn't their first time meeting like this. As I watched, Lily pulled out her phone and showed Danny something on the screen. Whatever it was made him laugh, and she playfully swatted his arm. They looked like lovers. They looked happy, they looked nothing like two people who were betraying someone they both claimed to love. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with questions. How long had this been going on? Did Marcus know? Did anyone else in the family? No, most importantly, what was I supposed to do with this information? For the next week, I carried that secret like a stone in my chest. Every time Marcus called to update me on wedding plans, every time he mentioned how happy he was with Lily, how perfect she was for him, I felt physically sick. I kept telling myself that maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe Lily had made a mistake, realized her error, and ended whatever was happening with Danny. Maybe I didn't need to destroy my son's happiness over one moment of weakness, but then I saw them again. This time it was at the grocery store. I was in the parking lot loading my groceries when I spotted them walking out together. They weren't touching, weren't even standing particularly close to each other, but there was something about the way they moved that screamed intimacy. I watched as they got into separate cars and drove away in different directions. Like they'd coordinated this, planned it out so no one would see them together. That night, I called Marcus. How are things going with the wedding planning? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Great, actually. Lily's handling most of it. She's so organized, Mom. So detail-oriented. I'm really lucky. And how are things with Danny? I know he's been struggling since your parents passed. A pause. Danny's fine. Actually, he and Lily have been spending time together lately. She's been helping him look for a new job. Isn't that sweet of her? Sweet. That's what Marcus called his fiancée's betrayal. Sweet. They spend time together? I pressed. Yeah, she picks him up sometimes and they go look at job listings, work on his resume. She says he just needs some guidance to get his life together. She's really good with people like that. People like that. My stomach turned. Lily wasn't helping Danny find a job. She was using Marcus's compassion as cover for their affair. That's very thoughtful of her, I managed to say. I know, right? I told you she was perfect. Perfect. The woman who was cheating on him with his own brother was perfect. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone. I could call Marcus back and tell him everything. Show him the photos. Make him see the truth about the woman he was about to marry, but I'd watched enough movies and read enough books to know how these conversations went. The messenger always got blamed. Marcus would be angry, hurt, defensive. He'd accuse me of trying to sabotage his relationship, of being jealous of his happiness, and maybe he'd be right about the jealous part. Not because I didn't want him to be happy, but because I'd never seen him look at me the way he looked at Lily. With pure adoration, complete trust, total devotion. I'd given him everything I had, and he'd never looked at me like that. Over the next few weeks, I found myself driving by places where I might spot them together. The coffee shop near Danny's apartment. The mall where Lily liked to shop. The park where they'd supposedly been helping him practice interview skills. I told myself I was hoping to prove myself wrong, to catch them doing something innocent that would explain away what I'd seen. Instead, I saw them holding hands while walking through the park. I saw them sharing a meal at a restaurant across town from where Marcus worked. I saw Danny leaving Lily's apartment building early one morning when Marcus was supposed to be out of town on business. Each sighting was like a knife to my chest, but not just because of what they were doing to Marcus. It was because of what they thought of me. I was invisible to them. So irrelevant that they didn't even bother to be careful around me. They never checked to see if I was watching, never worried that I might catch them. In their minds, I was just Marcus's pathetic mother. Too unimportant to be a threat. They were wrong about that. The final straw came 3 weeks before the wedding. I was at Marcus's apartment, helping Lily address invitations while he was at work. She'd been complaining about the wedding favors I'd chosen, saying they weren't elegant enough for her vision. I mean, I appreciate that you wanted to help. she said, her voice dripping with condescension, but this is supposed to be a sophisticated celebration. These little candles look like something from a church bazaar. I bit my tongue and kept writing addresses. The candles had cost me $200 that I didn't really have, but I'd thought they were lovely. Maybe we could exchange them for something more appropriate, she continued. I saw some beautiful crystal frames at Tiffany that would be perfect. Tiffany. Of course. Those would probably be quite expensive, I said carefully. Lily waved a dismissive hand. Money's not really an issue. Marcus got a bonus at work, plus we have your contribution to work with. My contribution? Like I was some distant relative. Making a modest wedding gift, not the mother of the groom who'd emptied her savings account to pay for their celebration. Of course, we'll need to be strategic about how we spend it, she went on. There are so many things we want for our new life together. A house, eventually. Maybe a trip to Europe for our first anniversary. Marcus has always wanted to see Italy. I looked up from the invitation I was addressing. Marcus wants to go to Italy? Oh yes, he talks about it all the time. How romantic it would be to walk through Venice together, see the Colosseum in Rome. We're thinking of doing a whole tour, maybe 3 weeks. 3 weeks in Europe. That would cost more than I made in 6 months. That sounds wonderful, I said, though my throat felt tight. It does, doesn't it? Lily's smile was radiant. We're so excited about our future together. All the places we'll go, all the things we'll do. She kept talking, but I'd stopped listening. All I could think about was Marcus at age 16, when I'd promised to take him to Washington, D.C. for his senior class trip. But then the water heater died, and I had to choose between fixing it and paying for his trip. I'd fixed the water heater. Marcus never said anything, but I knew he was disappointed. I promised him we'd take that trip someday, just the two of us. We never did. Now he was planning a 3-week European vacation with the woman who was cheating on him with his brother. Lily. I said quietly, interrupting her description of the hotel they wanted to stay at in Paris. Yes. Do you love my son? She blinked, clearly taken aback by the directness of the question. Of course I do. Why would you ask that? Because I see the way you look at him. The way you talk about him. And it doesn't look like love to me. Her expression hardened. I don't think you're in any position to judge my feelings for Marcus. Teresa. Your relationship with your son isn't exactly the gold standard. The words hit like a slap. What do you mean by that? I mean that Marcus has told me things. About growing up. About how you were never really there for him because you were always working. About how he felt like he raised himself. My hands went numb. He said that? He doesn't blame you, Lily continued, her voice falsely gentle. He understands that. You did your best as a single mother. But he's excited to have a real family now. People who put him first. A real family. People who put him first. I set down my pen and looked at this woman who was about to become my daughter-in-law. This woman who was sleeping with my son's brother while planning a future with my son's money. This woman who had just told me that everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd given up, everything I'd worked for, meant nothing. I think I should go, I said, standing up. Oh, don't be upset, Lily said, her tone suggesting she wasn't particularly concerned about my feelings. I'm sure Marcus appreciates everything you've done. It's just that he's ready for the next phase of his life now. The next phase. The phase that didn't include me. I gathered my purse and jacket without saying another word. As I reached the door, Lily called after me. Don't forget, the rehearsal dinner is at 7 on Friday. Marcus wants you there. I turned back to look at her. She was already bent over the invitations again, dismissing me like I was the hired help. I'll be there, I said, and I would be. But not in the way she expected. The week after that conversation with Lily, I couldn't sleep. Every night I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying her words over and over. Marcus had told her I was never there for him. That he felt like he'd raised himself. That he was excited to have a real family, now 57 years old. And I was just learning that my life's work had been a complete failure, but the more I thought about it, the more something else bothered me. Something beyond the cruelty of Lily's words or even the betrayal with Danny. It was the timing. Why now? Why was Lily being so openly dismissive of me just weeks before the wedding? Why was she suddenly comfortable telling me exactly what Marcus thought of me? The answer came to me on a Tuesday morning while I was getting ready for work. I was brushing my teeth, going through the motions of another ordinary day, when it hit me like a physical blow. She knew that I knew. Somehow, Lily had figured out that I'd seen her with Danny. Maybe she'd spotted me in that parking lot, or at the restaurant, or walking through the park. Maybe Danny had mentioned seeing my car somewhere he shouldn't have. However she'd found out, she knew, and now she was making sure I understood my place in the hierarchy. I was the outsider, the unwanted mother-in-law, the woman who could be dismissed and ignored. Even if I told Marcus what I'd seen, who would he believe? His perfect fiancée, or the mother who'd apparently been absent his entire childhood? The realization should have devastated me. Instead, it filled me with something I hadn't felt in years: rage, pure, clean, clarifying rage. I called in sick to work that day and drove to the public library. I needed to think, and I needed to do it somewhere neutral, somewhere that didn't carry the weight of all my failures and disappointments. I sat in the reference section with a notebook and pen, writing down everything I knew for certain. The dates I'd seen Lily and Danny together. The places they'd met. The lies they'd told Marcus about job hunting and resume building. Then I wrote down everything I suspected. That this had been going on for months, maybe longer. That they were planning something beyond just the affair. That Lily's sudden interest in dismissing me wasn't random. Finally, I wrote down what I wanted to happen. What I needed to happen, the truth to come out. But not from me. I'd watched enough family dramas to know that if I confronted Marcus directly, I'd be painted as the villain. The jealous mother who couldn't let go, who was so desperate for attention that she'd make up lies about his wife. But if the truth came from someone else, someone neutral, someone who couldn't be accused of having ulterior motives, that's when I remembered Mrs. Chen's nephew, Kevin. He was a photographer, specialized in weddings and events. Professional equipment, discretion guaranteed, references available upon request. I'd seen his card on Mrs. Chen's refrigerator just last week when I'd brought her some soup. She'd been bragging about his business, how well he was doing, how proud the family was of his success. That afternoon, I drove to his studio. Kevin was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30 years old, with kind eyes and an easy smile. The walls of his studio were covered with wedding photos, happy couples, proud families, moments of pure joy captured forever. Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Chen told me you might be stopping by. Congratulations on your son's wedding. Thank you, I said, though the words felt strange in my mouth. I was hoping you might be able to help me with something. I told him that I wanted to surprise Marcus and Lily with some candid photos leading up to the wedding. Casual shots of them going about their daily lives, maybe spending time with family members, just living and being happy together. It's for their wedding album, I explained. Something they can look back on years from now and remember how perfect everything was during their engagement. Kevin's face lit up. What a thoughtful gift. That's such a sweet idea. Sweet. There was that word again. The thing is, I continued, it has to be a complete surprise. They can't know they're being photographed, or it won't be natural. Kevin nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Some of the best shots are when people don't know they're being photographed. Just genuine moments. I gave him a list of places where Marcus and Lily might be spending time. Their apartment building. The coffee shop near Marcus's work. The park where they supposedly went jogging together. I also mentioned that Lily had been helping Marcus's brother Danny with job hunting, and that they might be spotted together at various locations around town. Just in case you see them, I said. Danny's part of the family too. Kevin took notes, asked about timing and locations, discussed his fees. Everything professional and above board. When do you need these by? He asked. The wedding is in 3 weeks. But if you could get me something within the next week or two, that would be perfect. We shook hands, and I wrote him a check. One more expense I couldn't really afford, but this time it felt like an investment. Over the next 10 days, Kevin called me twice with updates. He'd gotten some nice shots of Marcus leaving work, looking happy and relaxed. He'd captured Lily shopping for wedding accessories, clearly in her element, and then, on a Friday afternoon, he called with a different tone in his voice. Mrs. Patterson, I think we need to talk. Could you come to the studio today? My heart pounded the entire drive over. When I arrived, Kevin's easy smile was gone, replaced by an expression of uncomfortable concern. I'm not sure how to tell you this, he began, pulling up photos on his computer. But I think there might be some complications with the surprise album. The first photo showed Lily and Danny holding hands outside a small cafe downtown. The timestamp showed it was taken on a Wednesday afternoon when Marcus was at work. I thought maybe they were just friends, Kevin continued, clicking to the next image. But then I got these. The second photo showed them kissing in Danny's car. The third showed them going into a motel together. The fourth showed Lily leaving that same motel 2 hours later, her hair disheveled, her makeup smeared. I'm so sorry, Kevin said quietly. I know this isn't what you were hoping to capture. I stared at the images on his screen, feeling strangely calm. How many photos do you have? About 20. All from this past week. Could you print them for me? 8 by 10, high quality. Kevin hesitated. Mrs. Patterson, are you sure you want these? Maybe it would be better to just delete them and pretend this never happened. No, I said firmly. I want them all. And I want copies on a disc too. He printed the photos in silence while I wrote another check. When he handed me the envelope, his expression was full of sympathy. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "What any mother would do," I said. "Protect my son." The drive home felt surreal. I had what I needed now. Proof that couldn't be denied, couldn't be explained away, couldn't be blamed on my imagination or jealousy, but I still had to decide when and how to use it. That evening, Marcus called to confirm the final details for the rehearsal dinner. He sounded happy, excited, completely oblivious to the fact that his fiancée was sleeping with his brother. "Mom, I just want you to know how much it means to me that you've done all this," he said. "The wedding, the reception, everything. I know it wasn't easy financially." For a moment, I heard an echo of the little boy who used to tell me I was the best mommy in the world. "I just want you to be happy," I said, and meant it. I am. I really am. Lily makes me happier than I've ever been. My heart broke a little more. "I'm glad, sweetheart." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen with Kevin's envelope spread out in front of me. 20 photographs of betrayal, each one more damning than the last. I could call Marcus right now, ask him to come over, show him everything. Get this over with tonight, but something held me back. Maybe it was cowardice, or maybe it was the last remnant of hope that somehow, miraculously, this would all work out differently. Or maybe it was because I knew that once I revealed these photos, there would be no going back. Not just for Marcus and Lily, but for me too. I would become the woman who destroyed her son's wedding, who exposed his brother's betrayal, who shattered his world into pieces. Even if I was right, even if I was protecting him, would Marcus ever forgive me for being the messenger? I gathered up the photos and put them back in the envelope. Tomorrow was the rehearsal dinner. The day after that was the wedding. I had 48 hours to decide whether to save my son or save myself, but as I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I realized the decision had already been made. It had been made the moment Lily told me that Marcus was excited to have a real family now, the moment she made it clear that I was nothing to them. If I was going to be cast as the villain anyway, I might as well earn the role. I was halfway home when my phone started ringing. The first call came from Marcus's best man, Todd. I let it go to voicemail. The second was from my neighbor Mrs. Chen, probably wondering why there were cars speeding out of the church parking lot. The third was from a number I didn't recognize. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had 17 missed calls. I sat in my car, engine off, hands still gripping the steering wheel. Through my living room window, I could see the warm glow of the lamp I'd left on before heading to the wedding that morning. It felt like a lifetime. My phone buzzed with a text message. Then another. And another. I finally looked at the screen. "Marcus, what have you done?" "Lily, you destroyed everything, you sick woman." "Danny, this is all your fault." And then, from a number I didn't recognize, "I saw what you did at the wedding. Good for you. Some people deserve exactly what they get." A friend. I deleted all of them except the last one. Inside my house, I poured myself a glass of wine and settled into David's old recliner. The photo albums were still spread across the coffee table, exactly where I'd left them that morning. But now they looked different somehow. Like artifacts from someone else's life. The landline rang. I let the machine pick up. "Teresa, this is Margaret Patterson, Danny's aunt. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but you've destroyed 2 families today." That poor girl was devastated. "How could you be so cruel?" Poor girl. Lily was the poor girl in this scenario. The machine beeped, and immediately the phone rang again. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Jennifer Walsh from the Herald Tribune. We understand there was an incident at a local wedding today and we'd like to get your comment." The Herald Tribune. Of course someone had called the newspaper. I unplugged the landline and turned off my cell phone. Whatever was happening out there in the world, whatever chaos I'd unleashed, I didn't want to hear about it tonight, but sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily's face when she spotted that photograph. The color draining from her cheeks, her perfect composure cracking like a dropped mirror. The way she'd grabbed Marcus's arm, trying to pull him away from the crowd that was gathering around the guest book table, and Marcus, my son, standing there in his expensive tuxedo, looking at that image of his wife and his brother like he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. That can't be. He'd kept saying, over and over, while the wedding guests whispered and pointed and pulled out their phones to take pictures of the picture. Someone, I think it was Todd, had tried to remove the photograph, but by then at least 50 people had seen it. And in today's world, 50 people meant the entire town would know by morning. I'd watched from the parking lot as guests started streaming out of the reception hall. Some looked shocked, others excited by the drama. A few elderly relatives appeared genuinely upset, probably more concerned about the social embarrassment than the actual betrayal. Through the large windows, I could see Lily in her pristine white gown, surrounded by her bridesmaids, crying hysterically. Marcus stood apart from the group, staring down at his hands like he'd never seen them before, and Danny was nowhere to be seen. The coward had probably bolted the moment he realized what was happening. Around 2 in the morning, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Then footsteps on my front porch, followed by heavy pounding on the door. "Mom, open up? I know you're in there." "Marcus." His voice was rough, like he'd been shouting or crying. Maybe both. I didn't move from the recliner. "Mom, please. We need to talk about this." More pounding. Then silence. I heard his footsteps moving around to the back of the house, probably checking if the kitchen door was unlocked. It wasn't. I'd made sure of that. "This isn't over," he yelled. From somewhere near my bedroom window. "You can't just destroy people's lives and hide in your house." But apparently, I could. Because after another 10 minutes of shouting and door rattling, I heard his car start up and drive away. The next morning brought a new round of phone calls and text messages. I'd made the mistake of turning my cell phone back on to check the time, and it immediately exploded with notifications. Most of them were from numbers I didn't recognize, probably reporters or nosy neighbors wanting the inside story. But a few were from people I actually knew. My sister Janet, calling from Oregon. "Teresa, what in God's name happened?" Someone posted something on Facebook about Marcus's wedding and I can't make heads or tails of it, but it sounds awful. My old supervisor from the hospital heard about what went down at the Patterson wedding. "Are you okay, honey?" And then, surprisingly, from Marcus's high school girlfriend Emma, whom I hadn't spoken to in 15 years, "Mrs. Patterson, I just wanted you to know that what you did took incredible courage. I'm sorry it came to this, but some truths need to be told." Courage. I'd never thought of it as courage. It felt more like self-preservation. By noon, I was brave enough to drive to the grocery store. I needed milk and bread, and I figured most people would be at Sunday brunch or sleeping off their hangovers from whatever drama had unfolded after I left the reception. I was wrong. The whispers started the moment I walked through the automatic doors. I could feel eyes following me as I made my way through the produce section, could hear fragments of conversations that stopped abruptly when I passed by. "That's her, the one who, can you imagine? At her own son's wedding," I heard the bride fainted. Well, someone had to tell him. At the checkout line, the cashier, a young girl I didn't recognize, looked at me with obvious curiosity. "You're Marcus Patterson's mom, aren't you?" she asked as she scanned my items. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "My cousin was at the wedding yesterday," she continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "She said it was like something out of a movie. The bride just collapsed right there in front of everyone." "Did she?" I managed to say. "Oh yeah. They had to call paramedics and everything. Took her to the hospital." The girl's eyes were bright with excitement. "My cousin said there were photos of the bride with some other guy, and that's why she fainted. Is that true?" I handed her my credit card without answering. "I mean, it's probably better that you found out before they actually got married, right?" she pressed on. "Imagine if you'd found out later, after they had kids and everything. They had gotten married. The ceremony had already taken place when I left that photograph. By the time anyone saw it, Marcus and Lily were already husband and wife, which meant that whatever happened next, whatever ugly divorce proceedings or family battles lay ahead, I had guaranteed that my son's first marriage would be remembered. As the most spectacular disaster in our town's recent history, the drive home felt longer than usual. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a car parked across the street that hadn't been there when I left. A blue Honda with tinted windows. As I gathered my groceries, the car door opened and a woman got out. She was about my age, well-dressed, with the kind of confident walk that suggested she was used to getting answers to her questions. "Mrs. Patterson? I'm Carol Mitchell from Channel 7 News. I was wondering if I could have a few minutes of your time to discuss yesterday's events." I fumbled with my keys, trying to get inside before she reached my front porch. "I understand this must be a difficult time for your family," she continued, following me up the walkway. "But our viewers are very interested in your side of the story." My side of the story. As if there were multiple versions of the truth. "No comment," I said, finally getting the door open. "Mrs. Patterson, surely you want people to understand why you felt compelled to expose your daughter-in-law's affair in such a public way." I turned to face her, and for a moment I considered it. Telling the whole story. Explaining about the years of sacrifice, the dismissal, the cruel words about Marcus being excited to have a real family now, but what would be the point? It would just be more drama, more spectacle, more fuel for the gossip mill. I said no comment, I repeated, and closed the door firmly behind me. Through the window, I watched Carol Mitchell stand on my porch for another few minutes, probably hoping I'd change my mind. Eventually, she walked back to her car, but she didn't drive away. She just sat there, waiting, for what, I wondered? For Marcus to show up for another confrontation? For Lily to come screaming accusations? For Danny to finally grow a spine and face the consequences of his actions? As if summoned by my thoughts, another car pulled up behind the news van. This one I recognized immediately. Marcus's black Jeep. He got out slowly, like an old man, though he was only 32. Even from a distance, I could see that he hadn't slept. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair disheveled. He looked like someone who'd spent the night driving around town, trying to make sense of his new reality. Carol Mitchell approached him immediately, microphone in hand, her cameraman appearing from nowhere. Marcus waved them off, but I could see his mouth moving, probably telling them to leave his family alone. Family. We were still family, apparently, even after everything. He walked up to my front door and knocked, but gently this time. Not the angry pounding from the night before. Mom? I know you're in there. Please. I just want to talk. His voice was different now. Smaller. Like the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Marcus looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face pale and drawn. He'd aged 10 years in 24 hours. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped aside and let him pass. Behind him, I could see Carol Mitchell and her cameraman trying to get a shot of us, so I quickly closed the door. Coffee? I offered, falling back on the maternal instincts that had guided me through 32 years of caring for this man. He nodded and followed me to the kitchen, where we'd had so many conversations over the years. Homework troubles, girlfriend problems, job interviews, life decisions. But nothing like this. I busied myself with the coffee maker while Marcus sat at the small table where he'd eaten breakfast every morning for the first 18 years of his life. She's pregnant, he said suddenly. My hand stilled on the coffee pot. What? Lily. She's pregnant. His voice was flat, emotionless. Found out last night at the hospital. That's why she fainted. It wasn't just the shock of being exposed. It was because she's carrying a baby. I turned to face him, my heart sinking. A baby. This complicated everything. How far along? I asked. 3 months. 3 months. Which meant the baby had been conceived right around the time I'd first spotted Lily and Danny together. Marcus seemed to read my thoughts. I know what you're thinking. And you're right. The timing, it fits. I poured coffee into 2 mugs and sat down across from him. What are you going to do? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I have no idea. Lily says the baby is mine. Danny says they only got together recently, after she found out about the pregnancy. Says she was confused and scared and he was just trying to comfort her. And what do you think? Marcus wrapped his hands around his coffee mug like he was trying to absorb its warmth. I think I don't know my wife at all. I think I don't know my brother. And I think. He looked up at me with eyes full of pain. I think you knew something like this would happen, didn't you? I met his gaze steadily. I knew they were having an affair. I didn't know about the baby. How long have you known? 3 months. He closed his eyes. 3 months. And you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me? The question hung in the air between us. We both knew the answer. I wanted to tell you, I said quietly. I tried to find a way. But every time I imagined that conversation, I knew how it would go. You'd think I was jealous, or bitter, or trying to ruin your happiness. So instead you decided to ruin my wedding. The word stung, but I didn't flinch. I didn't ruin anything, Marcus. Lily and Danny did that all by themselves. I just made sure you found out before it was too late. It was already too late. His voice cracked. We were already married when people saw that photo. Do you understand what that means? I'm legally bound to a woman who was sleeping with my brother. And now she's pregnant, and I don't even know if the baby is mine. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. Then you get a divorce. And you get a paternity test. And you figure out how to move forward. He pulled his hand away. It's not that simple, Mom. This isn't just about me anymore. There's a baby involved. And everyone in town knows what happened. I can't just pretend none of this occurred. I never said you should pretend. I said you should move forward. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the backyard where he'd played as a child. Danny came to see me this morning, he said without turning around. He's leaving town. Says he can't face the family, can't deal with the shame. Just like him to run away when things get complicated. And Lily? Lily. Marcus turned back to face me. Lily wants to work things out. She says what happened with Danny didn't mean anything. Says she loves me and wants to save our marriage. My heart sank further. And what did you tell her? I told her I needed time to think. We stood there in silence, mother and son, surrounded by the ruins of the life I'd spent decades building for him. I'm sorry, I said finally. I'm sorry it came to this. I'm sorry I couldn't find a better way. Marcus nodded slowly. I know you are. And I know. You thought you were protecting me. But Mom. He paused, choosing his words carefully. This doesn't fix anything between us. What Lily said about you not being there when I was growing up, about me feeling like I raised myself, that was true. And finding out about her affair doesn't change that. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to nod. I understand. Do you? He asked. Because I don't think you do. You've spent your whole life trying to prove that you're a good mother by sacrificing everything for me. But what I needed wasn't your sacrifice. It was your presence. And now, even this, exposing Lily, feels like another grand gesture instead of just being there. He was right. Even in my moment of truth, I'd chosen drama over communication, revelation over relationship. I don't know how to be different, I admitted. This is all I know how to do. Marcus picked up his coffee mug and drained it in one gulp. Then maybe it's time to learn. He headed for the door, then stopped and turned back to me one more time. For what it's worth, he said, thank you for telling me the truth. Even if it took you 3 months and a public humiliation to do it. And then he was gone, leaving me alone in my kitchen with the ghosts of 32 years of good intentions and spectacular failures. Outside, I could see Carol Mitchell approaching Marcus. Again, but this time he stopped and talked to her. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could see him gesturing toward my house, probably explaining that there would be no more drama, no more revelations, no more story to tell. After a few minutes, she packed up her equipment and drove away. Marcus sat in his car for a long time, just staring at my front door. I wondered what he was thinking, what he was deciding about his future. Finally, he started the engine and pulled out of my driveway. I was alone again, but this time the silence felt different. Not empty or peaceful, but charged with possibility. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to worry about Marcus. Didn't have to figure out how to fix his problems or fund his dreams or clean up his messes. He was on his own now, for better or worse, and so was I. 6 months after the wedding that never should have been, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Asheville, North Carolina, watching strangers go about their daily lives. It was a Tuesday morning, and I had nowhere I needed to be. For the first time in 32 years, that felt like freedom instead of emptiness. The move had been impulsive. 3 weeks after that final conversation with Marcus in my kitchen, I'd put my house on the market. It sold faster than expected to a young couple who loved the mature trees and the quiet neighborhood. They were planning to start a family, they told me. The house would be perfect for children. I'd smiled and wished them well, though part of me wondered if that house had ever really been perfect for anything. It held too many memories, too much disappointment, too much of a life spent waiting for someone else to appreciate my sacrifices. The move to North Carolina had been practical more than emotional. My sister Janet had mentioned that the cost of living was lower there, the weather milder. I could stretch my limited savings further, maybe even find part-time work if I wanted it, but the real reason I'd chosen Asheville was simpler than that. Nobody there knew my story. Nobody would look at me and see the woman who destroyed her son's wedding, or the mother who'd failed to raise her child properly, or the nurse who'd worked herself to exhaustion trying to prove her worth. In Asheville, I was just Teresa. A woman in her late 50s, living quietly, figuring out who she was when she wasn't defined by someone else's needs. My phone buzzed with a text message. These days, most of my messages were from Janet, checking in to make sure I was settling in okay. But this one was from Marcus. Lily filed for divorce yesterday. Thought you should know. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, how are you doing? His response came quickly, better than expected. Worse than I hoped. And the baby? Paternity test confirms it's mine. Due in December. So I was going to be a grandmother. After all. The thought should have filled me with joy, but instead I felt something more complicated. Relief that Marcus would have his child. Sadness that I might not be part of that child's life. Uncertainty about what role, if any, I was meant to play. Congratulations, I typed back. Thanks. Are you happy in North Carolina? It was the first personal question he'd asked me in months. I looked around the coffee shop, at the artwork on the walls by local artists, at the bulletin board covered with announcements for hiking clubs and book groups and volunteer opportunities. I'm learning to be, I replied. We didn't text again that day, but something had shifted. A door that had been closed wasn't exactly open, but it was no longer locked. Over the following weeks, Marcus and I fell into a pattern of occasional brief conversations. Nothing deep or emotional, just updates on practical matters. His divorce proceedings. My new apartment. The baby's development. The weather. It wasn't the relationship I'd dreamed of having with my son, but it was honest in a way we'd never managed before. No grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, no attempts to fix decades of misunderstanding with a single conversation, just two adults, related by blood and complicated history, trying to figure out how to be in each other's lives without causing more damage. I learned that Lily had moved back in with her parents, claiming that the stress of the public humiliation had affected her pregnancy. She was demanding spousal support and half of Marcus's assets, despite their marriage lasting less than 24 hours. I learned that Danny had indeed left town, taking a job in Florida and cutting off contact with the entire family. His parents. Friends were outraged, calling him a coward and a disgrace. Marcus seemed more relieved than angry about his brother's departure. Most importantly, I learned that Marcus was seeing a therapist. Not couples counseling or crisis intervention, but individual therapy to work through what he called family patterns that aren't serving anyone. I keep thinking about what you said, he told me during one of our phone calls. About how you didn't know how to be different. I realized I don't either. I've spent my whole life reacting to your grand gestures instead of just talking to you like a person. It was the closest thing to an apology either of us had offered, and I treasured it. In October, I got a job at a small medical clinic in downtown Asheville. Part-time, flexible schedule, working with a doctor who specialized in treating elderly patients. It wasn't glamorous work, but it felt purposeful in a way my old job never had. Dr. Martinez was about my age, a widow who'd moved to North Carolina after her husband died. She understood something about starting over in the middle of life. You have good instincts with the patients, she told me after my first week. They trust you. Trust. It had been a long time since anyone had said that about me. One of my patients was an 80-year-old woman named Helen who came in every month for blood pressure monitoring. She was sharp as a tack, with opinions about everything and the kind of direct honesty that comes with having lived through 8 decades of human foolishness. You're new in town, she observed during her second appointment. It wasn't a question. Yes, ma'am. Moved here from Ohio. Running away from something or toward something? I paused, checking her blood pressure cuff. Both, I think. Helen nodded approvingly. Good answer. Most people our age are running from something, but they won't admit it. Takes courage to start over when you're past 50. Does it get easier? I asked. Starting over, I mean. Honey, Helen said, patting my arm with her free hand, everything gets easier once you stop trying to be the person other people need you to be. Her words stayed with me for days. In November, Marcus called to tell me that Lily had dropped her demand for spousal support in exchange for him not contesting her request for full custody of the baby. She doesn't want me in the child's life at all, he said, and I could hear the pain in his voice. Says I'm too unstable, too likely to turn the baby against her like my family turned me against her. What did your lawyer say? That we'll fight it. That fathers have rights too. But honestly, Mom, he paused. I don't know if I'm ready to be a father. Not like this. Not with all this anger and confusion and legal battles. I wanted to tell him that nobody was ever ready to be a parent, that you figured it out as you went along, that love was enough to bridge any gap. But I'd spent 32 years learning that love alone wasn't enough, and I wouldn't lie to him anymore. What does your therapist say? I asked instead. That I need to focus on becoming the person I want to be, not the person I think everyone expects me to be. Smart therapist. And what kind of person do you want to be? Another long pause. Someone who doesn't need other people to fail in order to feel successful. The words hit me harder than any accusation he'd ever made. Because I recognized myself in them, recognized the pattern I'd passed down to him without meaning to. The need to be needed, even when it wasn't healthy for anyone involved. Marcus, I said quietly, you don't need my approval to become that person. You never did. I know, he said. I'm starting to figure that out. On Thanksgiving, I had dinner with Dr. Martinez and her extended family. 3 generations gathered around a table that groaned under the weight of traditional dishes and family stories. I helped with the cooking and the serving, and afterward I sat on the porch with Dr. Martinez's mother, a 90-year-old woman who'd raised 5 children during the Depression. You have sad eyes, she told me matter-of-factly. But not broken eyes. Sad eyes heal. Broken eyes don't. How can you tell the difference? Broken eyes don't see possibility anymore. Yours still do. That night, I called Marcus. Not because I had news to share or problems to solve, but just because I wanted to hear his voice. Happy Thanksgiving, I said when he answered. You too, Mom. How was your day? I told him about the dinner, the family, the porch conversation. He told me about spending the day alone, reading and catching up on work, preparing for the custody hearing that was scheduled for the following month. I've been thinking, he said as our conversation was winding down. When the baby comes, assuming I get visitation rights, would you like to meet your grandchild? My breath caught. You'd want that? I think I would. Not right away, and not if it's going to turn into some big emotional production. But yeah, I think I'd want my kid to know that they have a grandmother who cares about them, I would love that, I said, meaning it more than I'd meant anything in years. Good. But Mom? Things have to be different this time. No grand gestures, no trying to fix everything, no sacrificing yourself to prove your love. Just, be present. Can you do that? I thought about Helen's words, about sad eyes versus broken eyes, about the difference between running from something and running toward something. I can try, I said. That's all any of us can do. After we hung up, I sat in my small apartment looking out at the mountains that surrounded Asheville. They were ancient and weathered, shaped by time and storms into something both strong and beautiful. I was 57 years old. I had a part-time job that I enjoyed, a small but comfortable home, and a relationship with my son that was finally based on honesty instead of obligation. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in decades, that felt like an adventure instead of a threat. My phone buzzed with one more text message. Marcus, by the way, I love you. Just in case I don't say it enough. I smiled and typed back, I love you too. Just in case you ever doubt it. Then I turned off the phone and went to bed, sleeping peacefully for the first time in longer than I could remember. Outside my window, the mountains kept their ancient watch, shaped by storms but never broken by them, just like me.